I'll never forget the summer I moved to a new city for an internship. Fresh out of college, I was eager for a change of scenery and a fresh start. The city was bustling, but without any familiar faces. It felt incredibly vast and a little lonely. That's why I was so receptive when I met this guy, Liam, at a local coffee shop. I was buried in a book, nursing a lukewarm latte, when he casually slid into the seat across from me at the communal table. He had this easy smile and an almost disarming confidence. We started chatting about anything and everything, our mutual newness to the city, our career aspirations, even our favorite obscure indie bands. He seemed incredibly genuine, enthusiastic, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. He laughed easily, and his eyes had a spark that made him instantly likable. We exchanged numbers, and honestly, I thought it was just one of those fleeting, friendly encounters you have in a new place that quickly fades. To my genuine surprise, Liam texted me the very next day, inviting me to an open mic night at a dimly lit bohemian cafe. My initial thought was, why not? It was an opportunity to step out of my comfort zone, explore the city's hidden gems, and maybe even make a proper friend. The night was a mix of surprisingly good and hilariously bad performances. Liam was incredibly encouraging to every performer, clapping enthusiastically and making witty, positive comments. He introduced me to a few people he vaguely knew from other events, but they mostly kept to their own conversations. Liam, however, was fully engaged with me, leaning in to share whispered jokes about the amateur poets and offering insightful critiques of the musicians. We ended up staying out pretty late, talking until the cafe started stacking chairs. A week or so later, he invited me to a house party. Again, I felt a familiar flicker of hesitation. I still didn't know many people in the city, and going to a party where I'd only know one person felt a bit daunting. But Liam assured me it was a super chill, no pressure gathering at a friend's place. The house, perched on the outskirts of the city, was larger than I expected, and already buzzing with people when we arrived. Liam, with his natural charisma, seemed to effortlessly glide through the crowd, chatting animatedly with various groups. I noticed he didn't really introduce me to anyone new, which was a little odd given how social he was. He'd occasionally swing by, touch my arm, and asked if I was having a good time before drifting off again. I spent most of the night feeling a bit like an accessory, standing awkwardly by the snack table, nursing a drink. Still, Liam's energy was infectious, and I rationalized my discomfort by telling myself I just needed to adjust to his expansive social circle. Then, a few weeks into my internship, Liam floated the idea of a camping trip. He said he was planning to go solo to a remote spot he knew by a secluded lake, perfect for stargazing and getting away from the city noise. My friends back home were always too bogged down with work or responsibilities to commit to anything like that. The thought of crisp mountain air and endless stars was incredibly tempting. I asked if any of his other friends were coming along, and he just shook his head, saying, "Nah, they're all tied up with family stuff or whatever. Just me, solo, you know?" It struck me as a little odd for someone so outwardly social to be planning such a trip completely alone. But I brushed it aside. Maybe he just needed a break from people. The allure of the Grand Canyon, which he suggested we could tag onto the trip if we had time, was too strong to resist. I confirmed my days off from the internship, and just like that, the trip was set. We drove out on a Friday afternoon. Liam had rented a beat-up old SUV that looked like it had seen better days. The drive stretched on, taking us further and further from the familiar urban landscape. As we ventured onto increasingly narrow and less maintained roads, the cell service became intermittent, then completely vanished. The isolation was palpable, yet there was a certain wild beauty to it. By the time we finally reached the designated campsite, it was already pitch black, save for the faint glow of the stars beginning to pierce through the twilight. The area was even more remote than I'd imagined. There were no other tents, no other campers, no signs of human activity for miles around. Just us, and the vast, silent wilderness. A tiny knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach, but I dismissed it as typical first night in the woods jitters. Liam, surprisingly efficient, quickly set up the tent. He had brought a small cooler filled mostly with beer. We started a modest campfire, its flames dancing against the impenetrable darkness, and spent some time just chatting, the beer making the remote silence feel less daunting. The stars truly were incredible, a dizzying tapestry of light that stretched infinitely above us. As the night wore on, however, a profound tiredness began to settle over me. Even though Liam seemed keen to keep drinking and talking into the small hours, I decided to call it a night. As I unzipped my duffel bag and pulled out my sleeping bag, a subtle wave of discomfort washed over me. The tent was surprisingly small. It wasn't one of those spacious two-person tents with ample room. It had 2 sleeping bags laid out side by side, practically touching. There was barely any space between them, let alone enough for another person to comfortably walk. I hadn't thought to ask about the tent size when he mentioned it, foolishly assuming a standard camping setup. When I half-jokingly mentioned how cozy it was, Liam just chuckled, a low, easy sound, and said, "Yeah, perfect for keeping warm, right?" He then offered me his extra, plush camping blanket, assuring me he had plenty. His casualness made me feel a bit silly for even bringing it up, so I just shrugged off my unease, attributing it to his generally easygoing nature. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. I'm a truly light sleeper. The slightest unfamiliar sound can yank me from the deepest slumber. This time, it wasn't a distinct sound, but rather a faint, almost imperceptible rustling nearby, combined with a sudden, oppressive awareness in the darkness. I opened my eyes slightly, keeping them mostly lidded, and my breath hitched. I saw Liam. He wasn't in his sleeping bag. He was sitting upright, completely still, facing away from me, just a few feet from my head. The outline of his shoulders was clear against the faint starlight filtering through the tent fabric. My heart started pounding a frantic drum against my ribs. What was he doing? Was he sick? Just restless? I lay there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, forcing myself to breathe shallowly, pretending to be asleep. After a prolonged moment that stretched into unbearable tension, he slowly, almost imperceptibly, lay back down into his own sleeping bag. The rustling sound stopped. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to calm myself, desperately trying to convince myself it was nothing, just a trick of the darkness, a sleep-disoriented moment. But the lingering image of him sitting there, silent and still, wouldn't leave me, and it was a long time before I drifted back into a fitful sleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling a profound sense of disorientation, a lingering residue of the night's strange encounter. The first thing I instinctively reached for was my phone. I had been careful, placing it inside my sleeping bag next to me for safekeeping, especially with the poor signal. But it wasn't there. My fingers brushed against the fabric, then the ground where it should have been. A cold dread began to spread through my chest. I frantically searched around my sleeping bag, my pillow, then the entire tent, pulling things out of my duffel bag in a growing panic. It was nowhere. "Hey, Liam, have you seen my phone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though my heart was doing somersaults. He looked up from zipping his own bag, a picture of innocent surprise. "Oh, I thought you had it in your pocket. Maybe it fell out when you got in the tent last night." He sounded genuinely concerned. He got up and started casually helping me look, peering under discarded clothes and rummaging through my bag. After what felt like an eternity, he pointed to a spot beneath my sleeping bag, tucked away, almost out of sight. "Here it is!" he exclaimed, triumphantly pulling it out. The location was undeniably weird, almost like it had been deliberately placed there, a little too perfectly concealed. A fresh shiver ran down my spine, but I tried to dismiss it, blaming my own clumsiness from being tired or still slightly off from the unsettling night. I forced a smile and thanked him, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that something was very wrong. We spent the day hiking, scaling a moderately challenging trail to a breathtaking viewpoint. Liam was his usual jovial self, bounding ahead, constantly encouraging me, and seemingly oblivious to the growing unease swirling within me. He'd make jokes, point out wildlife, and talk endlessly about his past adventures, none of which seemed to include other people. I mostly just nodded and offered monosyllabic replies, my mind racing. My unease morphed into a dull ache in my gut. We came back to the campsite late afternoon, tired and dusty. I tried to subtly suggest we pack up and head back to the city that night, making an excuse about needing to get an early start for work. But Liam insisted on staying one more night, waxing poetic about how the stars would be even more spectacular and how we had to experience them one more time. I reluctantly agreed, feeling trapped by the remote location and my own politeness. That night, after a quiet, almost strained dinner by the campfire, I made a deliberate effort to secure my belongings. My phone, my car keys, my wallet, everything went into a small, zippered inner pocket of my backpack, which I then shoved deep into my sleeping bag at my feet. I also made a point of zipping up the tent door securely, pulling the zippers all the way to the very bottom, even tying a loose knot in the pull tabs for extra measure. I climbed into my sleeping bag, every nerve on edge, trying desperately to shake off the pervasive anxiety that had clung to me all day. I lay there, listening to every rustle of leaves outside, every snap of the dying fire. I woke up suddenly a few hours later, in the dead of night. It was completely dark inside the tent, the moon having set. This time, I knew exactly what had woken me, the distinct, almost metallic whisper of the tent zipper. It was open. My eyes flew open, darting around in the blackness, straining to see. I could hear Liam's soft, rhythmic breathing from his side of the tent, seemingly sound asleep. My heart leaped into my throat, hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The zipper, which I had so meticulously secured, was now unzipped, a gaping maw at the foot of the tent, letting in the frigid night air. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over me, paralyzing me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. Was he just outside? Had he just come back in? Or had he been in here, watching me, and just left? The thought made my skin crawl. Slowly, painstakingly, I reached for my phone in my backpack. My fingers brushed against the familiar shape. It was there. My keys, too. Everything seemed to be in place. But the tent zipper, it was definitely open. A clear violation of the security I had so carefully put in place. I stared into the oppressive darkness, my breath catching in my chest, trying to process what was happening. My mind screamed at me to get out, to run, but where? We were in the middle of nowhere. I slowly, deliberately, reached for the zipper and pulled it up, making sure it was as secure as possible, tying the knot even tighter this time. I didn't sleep a wink for the rest of the night. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every subtle sound outside the tent made me jump. Every one of Liam's gentle snores felt like a mocking presence in the silence. I just lay there, eyes wide open, waiting for the first hint of dawn, my body rigid with fear. As soon as the faintest hint of sunrise painted the horizon, I scrambled out of my sleeping bag. My mind was made up. I calmly, but firmly, told Liam that I wasn't feeling well. A stomach bug, I mumbled, and needed to head back to the city immediately. He looked disappointed, almost crestfallen, but thankfully he didn't argue. He packed up the tent in silence, and the drive back felt infinitely longer than the drive there. I kept my gaze fixed on the passing scenery, barely speaking, only offering curt answers to his attempts at conversation. Every time he glanced at me, or hummed along to the radio, completely oblivious to the terror I felt, I had to suppress a shiver. The moment my phone picked up a signal, a few hours outside the city, I called my best friend. As I recounted everything, the small tent, the rustling in the night, the missing phone, and finally, the open zipper, her voice on the other end grew increasingly horrified. She urged me to block Liam on everything immediately, her alarm echoing my own unspoken fears. Before I did, something compelled me to check his social media one last time. His profile picture was still that smiling, outgoing guy I thought I knew. I scrolled through his posts, looking for anything, any clue. Then I noticed something in the comments section on an older group photo. A guy I vaguely recognized from one of the earlier house parties, asking Liam, "Dude, what happened to us?" I clicked on the commenter's profile. It was private, but I could see his profile picture and a few mutual friends with Liam. On a hunch, my fingers trembling slightly, I sent him a direct message. I briefly explained who I was, mentioned where I'd met Liam, and simply asked if he was still friends with him. He responded almost immediately. His message was chillingly direct. Liam, stay far, far away from that guy. He's a total creep. You dodged a bullet. He didn't mince words. He went on to describe similar unsettling experiences. How Liam would slowly isolate people from their existing friends. How he'd show up unexpectedly at their homes or workplaces, and how he had a pattern of making people feel deeply uncomfortable and vulnerable. He even mentioned that several of Liam's former friends had ended up having to change their locks or even move apartments after cutting ties with him due to his persistent and unnerving presence. My blood ran cold as I read each word, a horrifying clarity washing over me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Liam wasn't just some friendly, outgoing guy looking for a bro. He was something much darker, something manipulative and potentially dangerous. The realization that I had been alone with him in such a remote, isolated location for 2 whole nights sent a wave of nausea through me. Those shivers, the ones I'd been feeling for days, intensified into a deep, bone-chilling cold that I still feel to this day. I blocked him on everything, deleted his number, erasing him from my digital life. But the questions linger. What were his true intentions? What was he doing in the tent that first night? And what might have happened if I hadn't woken up that final time, if I hadn't zipped the tent, if I hadn't insisted on leaving? The thought still haunts me. If this chilling tale resonated with you, if you felt the narrator's fear and the creeping dread, then help us share these stories. Like this video, share it with someone who loves a good scare, and subscribe to our channel for more unsettling narratives that will keep you awake at night. Your support helps us bring more true horror to light.